Hello and welcome to Learn with Indrjeet. This is another video in the series of videos titled Building a To-Do Management System Application in the latest .NET 8 framework from Microsoft. In the previous video, we created a custom API response and a model state extension class in the application project. If you haven't watched that video, please go ahead and watch that. In this video, we are going to create a to-do groups controller and implement the create endpoint in that. Also, we'll be looking at how to connect to the database within the Server Explorer window in Visual Studio. Then, we'll be testing the create endpoint in Swagger as well as Postman. So there are a lot of things to learn in this video. Please watch it till end. Let's get started. So here we are in Visual Studio. Let's start by creating a controller in the Web API for to-do groups. It will be an API controller with read-write actions so that we can have some code already written. To-do groups controller. Let's remove this line. In the route, we want to have the action specified. So let us put in action over here. And let's change this one to to-do group slash, and the name of the action will be get. We'll implement the get later. Again, this name will also be get with an ID. This will be to-do groups slash create. Let's change the name to create. Sorry. And this will be edit. So let's change the name here also, and this will be delete. So we'll implement the delete, edit, get methods later. First, let's implement the create method. For this, we need the data service injected. So let's do that. Private read only I data service, and it is saying generate a constructor for this and inject it into that. Okay, so now this create method will return it will be an async task of I action result. It will accept a to-do groups DTO, to-do group DTO. Let's name it as model DTO as a parameter, and will return that also. So I have copied some of the code to the clipboard, so let me use that so that you don't have to watch me typing. Let's paste that, and okay, get model state errors. Let's type that again. So get model state errors using application extensions. So here we are receiving a model DTO, the to-do group DTO. We are checking if the model is null. We are returning a bad request using the API response builder that we created in the last video to generate a bad request with this message and this description. Then if the model state is not valid, we want to get the list of errors from the model state errors extension that we created in the last video. If the errors are not null and the errors count is greater than 0, then we are using a message builder to create a proper message description for the bad request that we are generating. So it is saying create failed, and it will give us the errors as string. If everything is okay, we are invoking the data service to-do group service create method to create the DTO and if that DTO is null, we are returning returning a bad request saying some error occurred. Otherwise, we are returning a OK response created successfully, and we are also returning the endpoint, the URL where this resource is created. Okay, so it can be a 201, but for the time being we are using 200. Okay, let's save this. So we are going to test this create endpoint, but before that let me show you how to connect to the SQL Server database from within Visual Studio Server Explorer. Okay, so to invoke the Server Explorer window, the shortcut is Ctrl-Alt-S. In the data connections, we want to connect to our database that is there, the MS SQL Server 19. We have the database is over here, and we are going to connect to todo-ms_db that has only one table and it has nothing inside of it. So let's go to add connection, Microsoft SQL Server using .NET Framework data provider for SQL Server. Continue, and let's put in here /MS SQL Server 19 trust server certificate, and here we have the list of all the databases. So we'll select our ms_db test connection. Yes, here are the settings and the connection string. Okay, so here is the database, the table, the to-do groups table. It has nothing inside of it as of now. Okay, next we want to configure the connection string in the app settings.json file, and we'll add the required services to the request pipeline here. Okay, so let's do that. So in the app settings.json file, let's paste in the connection strings object with the default connection defined having the connection string. So the server name is MS SQL Server 19, database is todo-msdb, trusted connection is true, trust server certificate is true, and multiple active result set is also true. So let's make it a capital T and save. Now in the program.cs, we are going to add the required services, but before that let's get rid of this line and we'll replace this line, right? So let's do that. Okay, paste, and let me take you through line by line. So the first thing is to connect to the SQL Server database, where we are declaring a variable called connection string, and we are getting the connection string from the configuration builder.configuration get connection string and the default connection that was defined in the app settings.json. If that is null, then throw an exception, connection string default connection not found. If all okay, then builder services.add db context, this is the context class, and use SQL Server with this connection string defined up above. Then we are adding the data related services, the unit of work, the generic repository, and the data service, right? Now we are configuring the auto mapper. So mapper config is equal to new mapper configuration, add profile. This is the name of the class that we created for automapper profile in our application helpers in one of the previous videos, but I can see a typo in this file, so let's correct that first. This M should be in capital and there should be one P less. So remove that extra P from here, and from the name also let's make it capital. And now in the program.js file, let's make the M capital and using application helpers. Okay, so another typo is gone and the pipeline is configured. Now we can run the application and test the endpoint in Swagger and then in Postman. Okay, so build, rebuild, because we have changes in the automapper profile also. Let's close that. And one more thing that we want to do is to set this attribute to false. This is for the invariant globalization. For the time being, let's set it to false and then start the application. So let's see in Swagger if we are able to create the to-do group. And before that, let's put in a debug point. Yes, it is already there. So the shortcut for that is F9, toggle breakpoint. Let's go to Swagger, create, try it out. Let's remove the ID field and the group name will be test group 1. Let's copy this one so that we can use it later. Execute. It hits the breakpoint. F10 to move to the next line. The model seems to be valid and it is now going to create the to-do group inside of the database. Yes, it is created with ID 1. Let's confirm that here. Yes, it is there. And let's hit continue to see the output in Swagger. So here is the 200 response data. It contains the ID, group name and the creation, and the status code is 200. Okay, created successfully, and it is created at API to do groups /get/1. That's nice. Now let's check the same thing in Postman also. So in Postman, this is a new request. It will be a post and the body will be raw JSON. Let's put in the body, change the name to 2, and let's get the API address. So it is localhost 44360. Let's confirm that. Yes. /API/todo groups /create. Let's send the request and it hits the breakpoint. Let's continue. And again, the ID2 is created, test group 2 is created, and the result is 200. Okay, as you can see, right? So in this video, we created the to-do groups controller, implemented the create endpoint, tested the create endpoint in Swagger as well as Postman. We learned how to connect to the SQL Server database in Visual Studio itself using the SQL Server Explorer window. We configured the app settings.json file to have the connection string. Then we configured the pipeline and added the required services. Also, we added JSON options to the controller for reference handling. In the next video, we will be implementing and testing all other endpoints in the to-do groups controller. We'll test them. We'll build this to-do groups controller in such a way that it can be, the code here can be used for another controller for copy and pasting, so that the development of other controllers is faster. I hope you like the content of this video. If so, please like, share and subscribe to my channel. Please let me know in comments what you like, what you learned in this video. If you have any queries or questions, please ask them in comments. Thank you for your time. Keep learning.